the early years.
I was born in a little town called Eger, not so far from Pilsen, as Mixed beer is better known. My father was an opera singer, and he fell in love with a girl, and the parents would only permit the marriage if he gave up the opera, because it was considered in those days not very honorable. And they were quite well off apparently. And so he made him become a businessman, and he didn't have talent for that. And he opened something like one of the first department stores ever. It was his idea. But in 4 towns in Czechoslovakia, at that time Bohemia, part of Austrian Empire. So he tried, he had 8 children, I was the 5th. He tried with all of them to make them musicians, because he couldn't make music anymore. That's what I think now. And I was the only victim.
And then
he had lessons with a piano teacher, Fräulein Tausig. She was very short. And she had one gland here which was sticking out like a long finger. And she was hunchback. And I loved her, but I was scared of her.
she made quite an impression on you.
When the lesson was good, she made what she called beer soup, a soup out of beer. This I just found terrible, but I ate it. I didn't want to displease her. But she was not a better teacher, I think.
Did Pilsen have more music? Did you go there to listen to music? Or?
Well, my father took me there to play for a pianist, Grünfeld. He was at that time, one of the most popular pianists. I remember he's playing something really incredibly beautiful. You know, this little Viennese, special Viennese music like.
Now you're talking about a time you were 7, 8 years old.
No, I was already 8.
8 years old. And you remember clearly how Grünfeld played?
I heard him, of course, later, because he took me to Vienna. He said I should study in Vienna. Prague, I played first in Prague, but there they felt I was too young. They couldn't accept the rules, didn't permit an 8-year-old to study at the conservatory. So he took me to Vienna, where a friend of his accepted me as a student. Richard Robert, yes. At the same time, Stel was studying there.
But where did you live at that time, really?
Well, they found a family. I don't know if you should bother you with those things.
No, I'm interested. I have a reason for
because
asking.
It was kind of sad.
That's why
I didn't realize.
That's why I'm asking you, because about this whole drive towards study and what it did to your early family life.
Well, thinking back now, I don't understand why I wasn't more lonely. Because those people were terrible people. I think I was even there, I was very unhappy, but not for loneliness alone, I think, because for all the meanness which I never known. Then I went to another family. There was an old lady with one leg, and the daughter was an elderly spinster, and it wasn't much better there. But since the old lady wanted to please me and tried to catch me, they say, around a round table, you know. But I had to pretend I couldn't catch me.
With their one leg. That's marvelous.
My teacher was wonderful to me. And Grünfeld was very nice.
But tell me, you were studying piano. How was it? What did you do with your regular school studies?
I had never any school studies in my life.
You know, this is the first time. Now I know why we're such good friends. I never went to school either. I went, I think, for 6 months when I was 7 years or 6 years old, that's all.
But you must have been tremendously curious.
No, completely. Always curious, always found out from other people, from older people, from arguments. This is the way I learned, from arguing with older people.
Wonderful. Now I
never
had
such old friends with so much similarity. No, but I was curious because really, you grew up at a time, you had to leave your family, at a very young and a very tender age, tender in the need of affection and attention. You were living alone in Vienna, and then came the war years. After all, the war broke out, you were only 11 years old, right?
No, I was already, I was 11,
11, right? You were born in 3.
No, very
I know, you were born in 1903. At that time, you were living with whom? Your family hadn't arrived yet?
I moved to Vienna right at the beginning of the war. 1914, in the fall. But then we lived in a very small apartment in Vienna. We were bitterly poor. By then my father had lost everything. He was a poor businessman and went bankrupt, I think 4 times.
This was a difficult time. You lived in the war, family was poor, Vienna. A very important age, the ages of 11 to 15. And there's nothing that I've read very much about you in those years that tells us, and this is what is interesting to me, of that period in history, because you lived it and we hear about it.
But first we lived in kind of a ghetto. Then my father was very inventive. He started polishing, shoe polishing in the basement somewhere. So we had a little more money and moved out in the suburb of Dublin.
Because there was also, you lived in a doubtful area, I think.
It was the first year where we lived first in Vienna. There were many prostitutes. But I remember how kind they were at the corner standing there and giving me candy. And candy, first of all, was something unknown in those years, war years. There was no food, and certainly no candy. And if there were, we couldn't have afforded it. We were bitterly poor. They were all very sweet to me, very nice. I wish I could say thank you now for that.
All right, you were tubercular and you were supposed to go to Paris and you missed the train.
The tuberculosis, it's hard to describe the war years, the starvation. One accepted it, being always hungry. Bread was mixed with sawdust to make it a little more filling, but one of my sisters, she died from tuberculosis. You saw people dying on the street from starvation,
Where was your debut? In what kind of a setting? This is 1915, it is Vienna, it's in the war years. Now, where did you play? Where was it?
Große Musikvereinssaal.
Naturally.
It's a Tonkünstlerverein. I think it was the debut in Vienna of that very famous German soprano, Claire Dux. And apparently she wasn't a success.
But you were?
But I was, yeah. So later on I told her, she's dead now, so I can talk about it. She got very angry at that time with me. It was many, many years later. You spoiled my debut. I received all my life kindness.
But you worked very hard.
I think so, yeah, but nobody made me. When I was very little, I was made. When I was 5, 4, my father made me practice. And when he wasn't home, my older sister, she was paid to sit next to the piano seat and I would practice. I didn't get anything, but I never forgave her.
How old were you when you decided you wanted to practice yourself, without father or sister?
It was late. No. I mean, I really decided composition.
Yeah.
I think it was 16 or so. Before it didn't occur to me that I had a choice.
I mean, even after your debut at 12 and 13 and 14?
I just took, that was it. There was no question about it. That was it. There was no question about it. I only began to doubt it when when the revolution, when everything broke down. I began to think maybe this music really needed. There was starvation, people were dying on the street. 1918, the end of the war. And then I wondered if I shouldn't be a carpenter or something, more useful. And then I realized that's what I was made for. So
Did some specific happening change your mind and move you into music permanently?
No, I should perhaps mention my intellectual life really began when I was about 13. I met a very unusual lady, Frau Dr. Schwarzwald. She took a great interest in me, and in summer she had a camp. And there where I met her first. She brought me there, and she took immediate interest and treated me like an equal right away. And in her home in Vienna, I met quite, in her circle, outstanding people like Kokoschka,
Painter,
Adolf Loos,
architect.
I was 1 year too late for Rilke.
The poet.
He was a but then he moved to Switzerland.
Well, she had an extraordinary circle of friends.
Incredible. She was an absolute great woman, you know. Intuition. Incredible.
What was she was trained as a teacher or a musician?
She was trained as a teacher. Unfortunately, she sang. But she was
so nicely said.
She realized it was painful for me. And then she quit. But still, I wore many Schubert songs. Even she had a very penetrating voice. But to the music and to Sylvia and all those beautiful songs by Schubert. I imagine how it should sound, and chamber music I did very little.
Now you reached 17, and then?
No, it was long before when I met Schönberg, when I was 15.
15.
Actually through this for Dr. Schwarzwald. There was Adolf Loos, he was an architect, a great intellectual spirit, wonderful man. And he said, you shouldn't stay with your teachers anymore. You should need new influence and you should go with Schönberg. I said, how? Come with me now, there's a performance of the Schönberg Society he had founded, fine for modern music. And he took me there, and I heard the concert, and afterwards introduced me to Schönberg and said, you should study with you. So I did, and then I had for 2 years kind of seminar, and I loved him, I adored him. He was a wonderful man. Warm-hearted, and he could be gay and funny, some of humor. But he was very strict with me, because he said, when I bought him a rondo I had composed, rather in his style, etc., Breton, and how dare you? You can't even write a good two-part invention yet. So I shot his counterpoints very severe. And sometimes that will amuse you. Afterwards, sometimes he played chamber music. It was a kind of seminar. It was Kohlisch, you know.
Yeah, Rudolf Kohlisch. Who later became a left-handed violinist.
Yeah, he lost finger. The war. He changed arm. The viola I forgot. And cello was Schönberg. Second violin I forgot too. But when we played Mozart quintet, I played second viola.
No.
Yeah. He shocked me. Well, it wasn't good, but it was better than Schönberg's cello playing.
Oh my goodness.
There was just the intent, you know.
As a teacher, how was his teaching to you in the classic literature?
Well, he had analysis of the great classical works, and he felt himself a continuation, not at all evolutionary. He felt himself probably knows, a continuation
and evolution of Brahms.
And don't misunderstand me, I have great admiration now more than ever for his work. Even so it is, I don't think I could play this, honestly, but I admire the weight, thoughts, and the inspiration too. Later on I couldn't, for some reason, I didn't feel honest anymore to play it. And that he never forgave me.
You had been now with Schoenberg a couple of years and you were playing as a soloist.
Yeah.
Then you met another man. I want you to tell the story.
Of course, before I played, every year 1 or 2 recitals in Vienna. It was, I guess, part of my training, but it was same much more called career. But then when I was 17, I just couldn't stand anymore in Vienna. Schönberg had left for Amsterdam, and so I felt I was suffocating. Then again, my friend, Mrs. Schwarzwald, arranged with Loos and Kokoschka to bring Viennese culture to Paris. It was right after the war.
All right, you were supposed to come to Paris.
Yeah, and I missed it. It was arranged a special train, you know. How things are changed.
Yes.
When I missed the train, I met Alfbusch. I guess what you wanted to ask.
That's right, yes.
You know, it was a great violinist, great musician.
A man of great reputation already at that time.
Yeah, he was in Vienna very, very famous. And he asked me to play for him. I did. And he asked me, what are your plans? And I said, well, I'm suffocating in Vienna. I missed my waiting for the next opportunity to go to Paris. Bush told me, why don't you study with Busoni in Berlin? I said, how? He said, well, here's the key to my house. I won't be there for the next 2 months or 3 months. But there's just a governess with my little daughter who's 3 years old. There are 2 good pianos. And you try to see Busoni, play for him. And the ticket for the train I sent you tomorrow morning.
And of course, Irene, the little 3-year-old, who's now Mrs. Serkin and the mother of your 6 children.
She said she decided right then to marry.
But she was 3.
That's what she said, yeah.
You went to play for Busoni, but he was too old, and
he thought I was too old.
He thought you were too old?
Yeah, he told me, how old are you? And I said, 17. He said, you are too old for taking lessons. Be 17, but ought to know what's right and wrong. Go to concerts. If it's a good artist, you learn something. If it's a bad concert, you learn even more.
Do you believe that today?
No. But I'm very proud of it. That he has so much confidence.
Absolutely. To do a program about Rudolf Serkin without hearing him play would be unthinkable. Also improper, because music and Rudolf Serkin are indivisible. Recently at Carnegie Hall, he gave a recital of astonishing beauty. Among
I think it was in Switzerland. He wasn't in Europe very well known, you know. It was with a Scala orchestra we lived at that time in Basel. And he conducted in Zurich, the Scala orchestra, 2 concerts. And we went over to hear it, we were completely overwhelmed. It was a new world, you know. This combination of intensity and wonderful warmth and temperament, and sitting observing all the markings. Never in contradiction to any of the markings.
What was the program? Do you remember?
It was
Brahms, Beethoven?
Brahms' Second Symphony. I remember it because afterwards we met him at the home of a mutual friend,
Yeah.
Mr. and Mrs. Reif in Zurich, and there was Furtwängler too, who didn't like it at all. It was a party, and Furtwängler became very outspoken and attacked Toscanini for taking the poco adagio second movement too slow. Too fast, he said, Florian. Toscanini was like a little schoolboy. I don't know, I can only do the way I feel it, but Steinbach, who was a friend of Brahms, came, he said, to conduct the Torino orchestra in Italy, where Toscanini was permanent conductor. And after the first rehearsal, he stopped in the same piece and said, gentlemen, there's nothing to rehearse. Who is your conductor?
You came to play the first time in 1934, Coolidge 33 with Rudolf Busch.
For one concert.
Tell, before we come to the United States, a little bit about Busch, who was so close to you. And after all, you married Irene, his daughter.
It's very hard.
After all, you married Irene, his daughter.
It's very hard to talk about someone who is so that close, you know. He was a wonderful musician, as you probably
I know. I met him and I played for him.
As a great instrumentalist, especially in early years. As a human being, it's hard to talk about a friend with it close.
But you were living in Basel, it was in the 30s, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then Hitler came in 33.
Yeah, but we lived already in Basel.
You lived in Basel, of course. I remember reading about your time there.
Busch had kind of a feeling there was something going on. Something horrible going to happen in Germany. And he was the first to protest against, after the 1st of April, when the boycott against the Jews came. The letter to all he was what they called Z-German, violinist. And he cancelled everything. He said, he will not ever go to German soil again until Hitler.
He was a man of great moral courage. Would you say that he was courage? Would you say that he was as much an influence on you in your whole musical approach, the basic feeling that you have about the necessary honesty in music?
But say I never had any doubts, any questions. That was it. But meeting him added to what, for instance, I learned from Schoenberg. Schoenberg was giving this feeling. So it was there. When I met Toscanini and Bush, it was a confirmation, or how should I put it? Continuation of. I was very fortunate, to have been under the influence of quite a few great people.
Then you came back in 36 with Toscanini, the G major Mozart and the Mozart E flat, you said. How clearly do you remember that first concert? The arrival in America.
It was one of the highest nights in my life. Maybe I was fairly scared in a way, but not as soon as first of all, he wanted to know how I played. So months before, we happened to be in Vienna at the same time. So I come to my home. If you have time this afternoon, I came, of course. I said, please, Mr. Secretary, I'd like to know how your tempest out. Then we had a second rehearsal. He didn't say a word. He said, I like it very much. Then we had a second rehearsal in New York before the concert. I played it for him. He didn't say anything. He looked at the score. And then so I wasn't scared anymore at the rehearsal. And he was just wonderful, so considerate, I played Beethoven and Mozart, and he put Beethoven first, and Mozart in the second half, and I asked him later on, why did you do it that way? Because I thought you might be a little nervous, and it's easier to overcome nervousness with Beethoven than with Mozart.
That's marvelous. That's really good. That's enormous thoughtfulness. He never made any suggestions to you the very first time?
Never. Once we were not together the first end of the after the cadenza. I took a little liberty, I didn't was even aware of it. And she was too late. So I stopped. He stopped. We did it again. But this time I played in time, So he stopped again and said, no, please do it. It's beautiful. He said, I was just too soon. If you know something, before he walked out, of course I was tense and so, and he looks at me and takes my hand, feel my face, and it's ice cold. That's the way it should be.
True.
It ought to be.
It's true. I get very annoyed, when people say, tell me, are you still nervous before? That's such an idiotic question,
I would like to meet the artist who is
not nervous. Exactly right. Rudolf Serkin has influenced pianists of 3 generations, and among his students are some of the noted pianists of the world. Among them is Claude Frank.
Now, Rudy Serkin's influence is, of course, an absolute...
is the world of music and musicians on the highest level. In his driven search that is no less devoted today in his 75th year, he has joined and been joined by some of the giants in musical history, amongst them Pablo Casals. He has also been a guide and a profound influence to the leading musicians of a younger generation, among them Eugene Stoneman. Martha Casals Stoneman has a unique position in contemporary musical life. An accomplished cellist herself, she was for many years before his death in 1973 the wife of Pablo Casals, and is now married to Eugene Stoneman, who, unfortunately, is in Europe and cannot be here with us. Welcome, Martita, and thank you for coming. Can you remember when you first met Rudolf Serkin?
Actually, I think the first time was in Puerto Rico in 1957 when he came for the first Puerto Rico festival. Of course, at that time, I felt that I knew him so much because of the recordings from the first festivals and because Casals spoke of him so often.
Tell me how Eugene, who I really wish he were here with us,
yes.
But when he's spoken to you about Serkin, tell him how he views his years with Serkin, his relationship with Serkin.
Well, as you know, the first time he met Rudy was in 1939 when he came to Curtis, and he was one of 6 of his first pupils there at Curtis. Well, he said that at that time he had the greatest admiration. He was overwhelmed because Rudy was a phenomenal pianist. He said he was technically the power, the strength, the perfection, but yet this loftiness in his playing, that attracted him naturally tremendously. It was the sacred privilege of performing, the respect to what the composer had to say, to the form, to the structure of the music. It was the instillment of these values that he remembers of Rudy. He says that will be forever in his mind and in his soul, the loftiness, the purity of approach, the selflessness.
You had a chance to see Rudy over the years a great deal with his family in both in Puerto Rico and in Vermont.
Yes, actually I'm very privileged because I knew Serkin through his friendship with Casals, through his friendship with Eugene, but on my own way, because I was very close to him, to Irene, to Judy, his daughter. As you know, she started playing the cello with me, and I got her interested. So I know also Rudy as a man of his family. I could see him in those three capacities, and with different people. Eugene as his teacher and sort of older brother, because this became later on with Eugene, from his pupil that he had to be disciplined to his relationship of a younger brother.
What in that family relationship? How did it seem to that he was handling the enormous problem of traveling, playing, teaching, and still to be the family?
Well, that was apparently a big problem because he was away from home so much, and his children just adore him. They really do, from what I could see. And that warmth that he has and that lovable quality that he has was all the more with his family. So he, in spite of the fact that he was away so much from them, and also away when he was at home, because apparently he spent hours and hours practicing, but he had that quality of wanting to know, of getting to their own problems, to know about every detail of their everyday lives and spend time with them. Whatever little time he had, he was careful to do that. I know that love and that great admiration for the man and for the artist is so instilled in them. I mean, there's nothing that another father who would have been close to them wouldn't have gotten in this relationship.
Do you remember where Casals first met him? Did he talk to you anything about the early years, the early association?
Yes, of course. He remembered very vividly the first meeting, which was early in the 1920s, at the house of Francesco von Mendelssohn in Berlin.
Regardless of the difference of approach, there was between them the most enormous respect and affection, each for the other.
Well, I think
of the way they looked, of what they did. They may not have found it that way themselves, but
this was the essence, I think, of their friendship. It was that respect that they had for each other's insights and genius in approaching music.
And we've asked Pastor Schneider to join us in this conversation because it seems so natural from all the